Good afternoon. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. My name is Kelly Head. I am the Business Information Librarian at Mid-Continent Public Library. I work with the Square One Small Business Services team. Today we are going to do a little bit of work in Demographics Now. It's one of the databases that we use quite a bit with our and we're going to go to Square One Small Business up at the top of the page. And then on the Square page, we're going to down. And I know sometimes this has trouble loading, so I'm going to go a little bit slower than I normally would. And then we're going to click on Browse Resources here. And then we're going to scroll down. And actually, just to point out a few things on this page while I'm here, this is the full list of our business databases. If you wanted to see all of the databases that the library has, you could click A to Z list up here at the top, or you could click Browse Subjects to see them organized by subject. So the database we're looking at today is called Demographics Now, as I mentioned. So we will click on the black underlined text to get to that database. And normally it would ask you for your library card number here, but I've already entered it, so I get to skip that step. So this database, just to kind of orient yourself with it, it includes a lot of reports and a lot of demographic data that's going to be under this demographics tab. We are not going to be doing much with this except for a couple different reports that you can pull through here. The majority of our walkthrough today is going to be on the Mosaic population guides. And you can find those if you go to this little button that looks like a hamburger, 3 lines. Click on that and then click on Help. And that will take you to the list of all of the different Mosaic population guides. And you'll notice that they are organized by group and then subtype within the group. So there's about 20 different groups, and usually the first step in determining your target customer is to figure out which group they would be in. And you can kind of get a sense for the type of people in the group by reading the name. So Flourishing Families is obviously going to be families primarily, and if we click on that, it will pull up a little profile of the folks who are in this group. So you'll notice they have key features of this group. So they're affluent, they're charitable contributors, they're involved in athletic activities, they save for college, they use their credit card a lot, and they do a lot of family-oriented activities, which is probably pretty obvious since it's Flourishing Families. So we can see all kinds of things in this profile, like the head of household age is kind of in the 36 to 45 range. Most of the properties of these folks are single family homes. Their household income is in a range between 125 to 150,000, and the typical household size is 2 people. Their children are usually age 13 to 18. And then if we scroll down, we can get some more detailed data about this particular group. And then if you scroll even further down, you get a little bit of a narrative that describes some of the characteristics of this group. Things such as where they shop, what they do for entertainment, how they lean politically, things like that. So, a good first step in determining who your target customer is to go through and read the groups and figure out which one of the groups is going to be closest to your target customer. And once you've done that, then you can drill down even further and choose which subtype within that group is the specific target customer that you're looking for. So just to give you a sense for what you would see and how those two differ, the typical subtype will have pretty much the same information that you would see in the other ones for the groups, but it will get a little bit more nuanced in terms of describing those folks. So it will kind of describe some characteristics of this subtype that might differ from other subtypes, even though they're part of the same group. So this is really where you get the best, most specific data. And I mentioned that we were looking at a way to determine the preferred advertising method for the target customer you're looking at. So, for instance, let's say we've determined that our target customer is in this ambitious singles group. They are youthful, cutting-edge singles living in mid-scale metro areas, balancing work and leisure lifestyles. So these folks typically would be a target customer for a coffee shop or a bar that has live music, a restaurant, any sort of nightlife activity would be the target customer. So a lot of local businesses would be trying to find this target customer and get their advertising message out to them. So they could use this persona or mosaic profile to look at their channel preferences. And these channel preferences tell you which way is best to advertise to them. So these numbers that you see under each icon represent whether the marketing channel in question is a below average or above average response rate. So if it's 100 or above, that means that that particular channel is above average response from this particular group. So if we look at the first one, obviously that's TV, so broadcasting and streaming television. So for these folks, the number is indexed to 135. So they have an above average response rate to television ads. So this would be a acceptable way of reaching out to these folks using advertising dollars. If we move on to the next icon that looks like a little envelope, that is going to represent direct mail advertising. And so since this number is 94, it's slightly below average, which means that it may be kind of on the fence in terms of if you want to use your advertising dollars to send a direct mail marketing campaign. It looks like these folks would have a roughly average response rate to that kind of advertising. Then if we move to the next icon, it looks like a little radio, and that represents radio advertising. So 89 is again kind of close to the average, so it wouldn't necessarily disqualify this as an advertising channel, but you might want to wait on doing a radio ad until you determine what your overall marketing strategy would be. So this one would probably not be at the top of the list for how we would reach these folks. Moving down to the second line, that first one that looks like a little message bubble represents texting or SMS. So this is a new form of, or fairly new form of advertising where you can send advertisements out by text message, and for these folks, they have a really high response rate to text messaging. So 240 means that they respond to text messaging advertising way more than the average profile would. So this would definitely be a good strategy for reaching these folks. So you have different ways of doing text advertising. Some of them are more opt-in programs where someone has to give you their cell phone number in advance and gives you permission to text them advertisements. Whereas other methods are more like geofencing, where you can target anyone in a specific area to send a text message to, and that's more of an opt-out program. Each one has different benefits and downsides. So you'll want to kind of figure that out separately, but this would definitely show that a text message advertisement would work fairly effectively with these folks. Moving over to the next one, email advertising is the @ symbol, and that has a slightly above average. So this would also be a good way to reach these folks through email marketing. That is another thing that you can do in a variety of ways. There are different programs like Constant Contact that allow you to send out email marketing campaigns. The library has one that's called Reference USA, where you can pull up people in different industries or people who have different interests and target them with an email marketing campaign that Reference USA helps you to set up. So if you're ever interested in doing something like that, let us know at Square One and we can help you get that set up. Lastly, and this one is really kind of surprising for me, is social media. So for these folks, they have a 43 under social media advertising, which is really kind of surprising because you would think the ambitious singles that are kind of in that younger category, 36 to 45, well, they're kind of entering middle age, but these folks would have been exposed to a lot of technology growing up, so to have such a low response rate to social media advertising is a little surprising, which just goes to show that you don't want to necessarily trust your assumptions, and it's a good idea to check these profiles to see what kind of data you can find about your target customer, because you may assume that they would prefer to have their advertising on social media when in reality they don't really respond that well to it. So that is just one small piece of how you might use these guides, and the way that I approached it was to have you look at the different profiles first as opposed to the geographic area that you're in. But I want to show you a way that you can tie these profiles to specific geographic areas. And so the way to do that is to go back to DemographicsNow, and we want to set a Geofilter. So there are two different ways of doing that, and Geofilter just stands for the geographical area that you want to search in. So you can start just by typing a name here, like a city, and it will list all of the cities in the US that have that particular name, and then you just select the one you want to use. Or you can go into the options menu and choose the geography list, and that will allow you to select multiple types of geographic areas. So block groups, this is going to be census block groups that are kind of smaller than counties, but bigger than, like, say, elementary school districts. Some of the other ones that get used quite a lot are counties, obviously. DMA stands for the metro area, so if you were wanting to choose, for instance, the Kansas City metro area, you could go under Missouri here, and then go to Kansas City, and then select Done. So now we've selected the KC metro area, which will include Overland Park, Lee Summit, Kansas City, Kansas, so those surrounding areas, as well as Kansas City, Missouri proper. So once we have our Geofilter in, we can go to the Demographics tab and then run some different reports. So usually I recommend just sticking with the basic tab and then looking at some of the reports here to get a sense for who lives in that area, but we want to tie these specifically to the Mosaic report. So we're going to go to Summary, and then we're going to choose a couple of the Mosaic specific reports. So this Mosaic detail charts is a good one for getting a high level overview of who lives in a particular area based on the group they're in. So this is just showing some basic demographic data about the KC metro area up at the top here, and then if we scroll down, it's showing each of the groups and the number of people in that group. So for the KC metro area, we have a high number of booming with confidence and singles and starters. And then it looks like third is in this autumn years category. So we might want to go back and look at those groups for those three profiles that I mentioned and get a sense for what the psychographic makeup is of those folks. So how do they lean politically? What are their purchasing behaviors? Things like that. And you can click on the links here to go directly to that profile of that group. So that is one way you might use it. Sometimes, however, you want to get down to the subtype and you want to see a little bit more specific data. And you may even want to target specific zip codes or areas that are much smaller than the entire metro area. So we could go in and I could type a zip code here, or I could go back to the geography list and I could select multiple zip codes. So for that, I'm going to go into zip codes by county, and I'm going to choose Missouri, and I'm going to choose Clay, and I'm going to do some of the zip codes that are near where I live. So I'll do 64155 and 64156, and next I'm going to look at, instead of the mosaic detailed charts, I'm going to look at the mosaic summary index report. So this is the report that will give you the percentages of the subtypes within each group. So this is really going to help you figure out who your local customers are. So for this particular geographic area, so these two zip codes, 64155 and 64156, the dominant cluster code is this cluster F22, fast track couples. So the number of households in the dominant cluster are 4,792, which represents 40% of the households in these two zip codes. So that is a huge number of people who fit into a particular psychographic group, and we would definitely want to learn more about them because they would be our local customers. So if we scroll down through here, we can see the percentage of each group or subtype. So kids in Cabernet represents 6% or 702 households. Babies in Bliss represents 1.6% or 189 households. Sophisticated city dwellers represent 19.1% or 2,241 households, so another big percentage here. Boomers and boomerangs represents 13.4%, so another high percentage that we would probably want to check out. And then if we scroll down, we see fast track couples. That's the one that's the biggest. So they're 40.8% of our population in these two zip codes, and they represent 4,792. So again, I could just click on any of these links, and it will take me directly to that profile, and I can see things like for these folks, TV advertisement and text messaging are obviously the two best ways to reach them. I would want to stay away probably from social media advertising again, and probably stay away from email because I have these other options that are probably going to pan out better. So if I were to go just based on their channel preferences, I would probably do a mixture of texting, TV, radio, and direct mail. And you can kind of split that up in terms of 25% each, or you could weight it a little bit more based on that number there. So you could do a third of them text messaging, or a third of your marketing budget or advertising budget for text messaging, a third of it for TV, and then split up the remaining third with direct mail marketing and radio. So that is the quick introduction to using psychographic data to figure out which marketing channel or advertising channel is best to reach your target customer. Hopefully this was easy to follow and digestible enough to where you don't feel